If you like our short stories, please like, comment and subscribe. A quiet hush blanketed the ancient stone chamber as the tall, robed figure stepped through the shadows. Hermione stood motionless on the cold floor, her heart pounding. Harry hovered close by, his stance protective and tense. Across from him, eyes burning like coals, stood the one they called Voldemort. His face was a pale mask of triumph and cruel amusement. For weeks, Hermione had sensed something was wrong, an unsettling hum in her mind whenever Voldemort drew near. Tonight, she would understand why. In a voice as cold as the chamber's chill, Voldemort addressed her directly. "You have grown powerful, Hermione," he said, not bothering to hide the twisted pride curving his lips. "I have watched you from afar, observed your every success, your every moment of defiance. Strange, is it not, that your talents exceed those of your peers?" Hermione swallowed hard. She was known for her keen intellect, but in this moment her voice failed her. Harry's gaze flicked between the two of them, confusion etched on his face. Voldemort took a deliberate step closer. "Do you never wonder why you felt different? Why the darkness in you stirs at certain times?" He gestured almost dismissively at Harry. "He is not the only one with a destiny. You, Hermione, carry my blood." The echo of that sentence, "You carry my blood," seemed to reverberate off the walls. Harry's breath caught. Hermione stumbled back, her chest tight. "That can't be true," she whispered, struggling to maintain composure. "I was raised by my parents, mortals who knew nothing of what they were given," Voldemort interrupted with a sneer. "I chose them to hide you in plain sight, far from suspicious eyes. They believed you were theirs, but you have always been mine," Harry broke in, his tone fierce. "You're lying. She's no pawn for your sick schemes." Voldemort's smile was thin. "A pawn? Hardly. I created her as my ultimate safeguard. Even if my enemies believed they had banished me, my legacy, my life, would endure." Hermione found her voice, though it quavered. "But how could I be your daughter? How could you have planted me with a family that had no knowledge of sorcery?" Voldemort swept his gaze over her, a cold satisfaction gleaming in his expression. "Because I am cunning beyond your imagination. Because I needed a vessel who would grow unsuspected, close to the forces that opposed me. Because I needed a living Horcrux." Harry stiffened at the unfamiliar term. "A Horcrux," he repeated. Although Harry was brave, even fearless at times, the dread in his eyes was unmistakable. Hermione felt a strange weight pressing at her heart. Something about that word, Horcrux, stirred half-buried memories, uneasy flashes of a presence in her mind at lonely hours. "A Horcrux," Voldemort continued, "is a container for a fragment of one's essence. A piece of my soul resides within you, Hermione. You are both my daughter and the final gate to my immortality." Silence fell, so thick it seemed no one could breathe. Hermione's thoughts churned in frantic circles. "Is this why I've sometimes felt a pull, a darkness I couldn't explain?" She tried to gather herself, but each question only led to more confusion. At last she managed, If what you say is true, then why reveal it now?" Voldemort's lips parted in something like a smirk. "Because I no longer need to hide you. The time for subtlety is over. You have grown into a formidable force. If you stand with me, we will reshape this realm to our will. If you defy me," his eyes flickered to Harry, "then my Horcrux shall be reclaimed by any means necessary." Harry edged forward, placing himself between Hermione and Voldemort. Though trembling with anger, he kept his voice steady. "You've underestimated her resolve. She'll never join you." Voldemort's laughter was a chilling note in the silent chamber. "You believe loyalty alone can override blood? Her power is bound to me. That bond will drag her into my shadows in the end, no matter how she might resist." Hermione wrestled with a torrent of disbelief and revulsion. Could it be possible that her remarkable abilities, her insight into sorcery, were all shaped by a lineage of evil? "No," she said softly, yet firmly. "I don't accept this." Voldemort raised a hand, and black flames licked at his fingertips. "You will, in time." Energy pulsed through the chamber, stirring a swirl of dust and debris. Harry lunged to defend Hermione, but Voldemort flicked his wrist, sending a wave of force that knocked them both back. Hermione struggled to stand, fear and anger warring within her. If a dark fragment was truly inside her, how could she fight it? Then, without warning, Voldemort vanished in a swirl of smoke, leaving a bitter echo of triumphant laughter. The chamber fell deathly still once more. Harry scrambled upright, eyes wide with concern. He reached for Hermione, who was trembling from both shock and a strange, gnawing sense of betrayal. "Are you all right?" he asked, voice ragged. She could only shake her head. "I don't know, everything's changed." Her pulse thundered in her ears. "We need to find out more about this Horcrux. If there really is a piece of his soul inside me, I don't know what that means for us. For me." With a supportive hand on her arm, Harry nodded. "We'll figure it out. Whatever the truth is, you're still you." The conviction in his voice sounded strong, but worry flickered in his eyes. Hermione's hand rose to her sternum, as though she might feel an alien presence beneath her ribs. Deep down, a cold dread settled in her bones. "I won't let him control me," she vowed internally. "I can't." Thus began the realization that everything Hermione thought she understood, about her life, her powers, her friendship with Harry, was on a precipice. If Voldemort's words held truth, her very essence was compromised. And if the last piece of his evil resided within her, the stakes were far greater than she'd ever imagined. She exchanged a glance with Harry, seeing his determination mirroring her own fear. The only way forward was to confront the darkness at its source. They had to learn everything they could about Horcruxes, about lineage, about defying fate itself. The chamber door creaked, and a gust of wind snuffed out the candles around them. Hermione closed her eyes, summoning every ounce of courage she had left. Unknown terrors lay ahead, but she would face them. She had no choice. She refused to be Voldemort's puppet, or worse, his silent ally. At her side, Harry gently squeezed her hand, and together they stepped out of the silent hall. Beyond the threshold, uncertain roads opened before them, overshadowed by the specter of a father who claimed dominion over Hermione's destiny. But for all Voldemort's cunning, he had overlooked the fierce conviction that burned in her soul. A spark of hope still lived there, bright enough to challenge any darkness. Hermione and Harry hurried along a damp corridor lit only by flickering torches set in iron brackets. A persistent draft made the flame shadows dance on the walls. Though Hermione struggled with turmoil roiling within her, she kept pace beside Harry, determined not to show any weakness. They emerged into a modest study, a windowless room whose ceiling disappeared into darkness. Shelves upon shelves lined the walls, each crammed with ancient tomes. The place smelled of dust and old parchment. From a desk at the center, an elderly caretaker looked up. His wizened features creased with concern when he saw their expressions. "You're back," the caretaker said quietly, placing his quill aside. "Your faces tell me the news is grave." Harry nodded, closing the door behind them. "We discovered something shocking. Hermione is..." He glanced at her, hesitating. Hermione took a steadying breath and finished for him. "I'm bound to Voldemort by blood. He claims I'm his daughter. Worse, I carry a piece of his soul inside me. He called it a Horcrux." Silence thickened in the little study. The caretaker's eyes widened, reflecting a slow-building dread. "A living Horcrux," he murmured. "The dark arts run deeper than I feared." Hermione swallowed. Her fingers curled around the back of a chair. "We need to know everything about these Horcruxes. Is there a way to purge that fragment from me without..." She couldn't finish the thought, but the caretaker grasped her meaning all the same, "without killing her." The old man rose, going to a shelf near the far wall. After a moment of rummaging, he retrieved a cracked leather volume. Its title was faded and unrecognizable. "This text," he said, "references lost methods of soul-binding magic. But be warned, the knowledge is incomplete and dangerous." He offered the book to Hermione, who took it with trembling hands. Harry moved closer, gently placing a hand on her arm. "We'll find answers together." Hermione opened the tome. Flicking past brittle pages, she found archaic diagrams and harsh incantations scrawled in spidery script. There were references to horrific rituals, objects soaked in malevolent power, souls split like shards of glass. And hidden between paragraphs were ominous warnings. When the container is a living being, the soul fragment roots itself into the host's essence. Removal can result in permanent damage, or death. She felt cold dread settling in her stomach. Harry read over her shoulder, his brow tightening. "We'll keep looking," he said with forced optimism. "There must be a safer method. Something that can extract the fragment without costing your life." The caretaker nodded in agreement. Legends speak of an artifact known as the Mirror of Severance, said to reflect and isolate the darkest part of a person. If it still exists, it might offer a way to separate you from that fragment of evil. Hermione's heart thudded. A fragile hope ignited in her eyes. "Where would we even begin to look for that mirror?" The caretaker grimaced. "No one knows if it's real or just myth. I've only ever seen mention of it in scattered footnotes. But if it does exist, such an artifact might be hidden in the catacombs beneath the old fortress in the eastern hills, beyond the wards most guardians maintain." He paused, then lowered his voice. "But I caution you, Voldemort has many loyal agents who do anything to stop you from removing his soul fragment." Harry shared a look with Hermione, an unspoken agreement. Their next step was clear, no matter the danger. "We'll try," Harry said. "If this Mirror of Severance is real, it could be our only chance." Days passed as they combed every musty record in the caretaker's possession. Rest was scarce, overshadowed by Hermione's increasingly vivid nightmares. A sinister whisper would echo in her mind when she tried to sleep, "You are mine." She'd bolt awake in a cold sweat, clutching at the intangible sense of darkness inside her. Harry stayed by her side, unwavering in his support. Sometimes, in the quiet of late night, she'd voice her greatest fears to him. "What if I'm too far gone already? What if it's not just a fragment of his soul, but it's changing me?" Harry reassured her in hushed tones, reminding her of her kindness, her drive to protect others, qualities Voldemort scorned. "You've grown into your own person," he would say. "That's real, Hermione. That's stronger than any curse." His words offered moments of warmth. But as days slipped by, the urgency only mounted. Dark rumors spread. Voldemort's forces were on the move. Mysterious robed figures prowled the outer villages, searching for signs of an elusive artifact. Hermione feared they sought the same Mirror of Severance. One late afternoon, Harry and Hermione readied for departure. They had gleaned all they could from the caretaker's library. Clad in traveling cloaks, they secured provisions for a journey east. The caretaker insisted they borrow an enchanted compass rumored to guide travelers toward powerful magical objects. At the library's threshold, Hermione turned to the caretaker. "Thank you," she said softly, "for your help. Without your guidance, we'd have nowhere to start." He placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "You carry a heavy burden. Should you manage to remove that fragment, you will break one of Voldemort's greatest safeguards. He will pursue you with unimaginable wrath." The caretaker's gaze lingered on Hermione, full of sympathy and caution. "Guard your heart well." Hermione inclined her head in gratitude, then stepped out into the corridor where Harry waited. The journey began at dawn the next day. The eastern hills were said to lie beyond stony plains and sprawling forests. As they traveled, the landscape shifted, rolling meadows replaced by rugged outcrops of jagged rock, trails less worn by footprints, and an ever-present hush that felt like nature holding its breath. With each mile, Hermione's awareness of the soul fragment seemed to intensify, as if drawn to something. Occasionally she'd clutch her chest, feeling a dull ache pulse. She fought down panic. "I have to hold myself together until we find that mirror." Harry kept a watchful eye on her. He, too, sensed the mounting tension in the air. They spoke little, focusing on the path, on rationing their meager provisions, and on scanning the horizon for any sign of threat. Toward dusk, they crossed into a narrow gorge. Steep cliffs on either side formed a natural funnel. The compass in Hermione's hand glowed a faint red, guiding them deeper. Harry pointed ahead. Do you see that opening in the rock wall? Sure enough, a faint torchlight flickered from a gap up ahead, as if some hidden entrance lay within. Hermione's pulse quickened. This could be the route to the fortress catacombs, where the mirror of severance might rest. Yet the sight of shifting shadows near the entrance set her nerves on edge. Her stomach clenched in a spasm of dread. She motioned for Harry to stay low as they approached. They crept closer, hugging the rocky edge, until they spotted two of Voldemort's minions standing guard. Clad in dark cloaks, these sentinels bore the unmistakable aura of malevolence. From their stance, it was clear they guarded the passage inside. Harry's face hardened. They must know we'd come here, he whispered. Hermione's eyes glinted with determination. She felt no desire for violence, but the safety of others, and indeed her own freedom, hung in the balance. They planned their approach swiftly, deciding stealth was best. If forced to fight, they would do so swiftly and silently. The ambush was tense but brief. Under cover of a careful disillusionment spell, Hermione and Harry crept up behind the sentinels. A sudden flash of wand light from Harry disabled one, while Hermione cast a binding charm on the other. They struggled and hissed, but fell in mere seconds. Breathing hard, Hermione checked that the guards were only stunned, not mortally wounded. She felt no triumph in beating him, only urgency pushing her forward. Harry placed his ear to the cavernous entrance. Inside, all was silent. He gave a small nod. We have to hurry before someone notices they've gone missing. Within the hidden passage, the walls were slick with damp, and occasional torch brackets offered meager light. Drips of water echoed from somewhere deeper in the dark. The air smelled stale and stagnant, as though few ever ventured here. The compass glowed brighter in Hermione's hand, confirming they were on the right track. At times, the path forked, but the artifact guided him at each junction. A pang in Hermione's chest flared stronger with every step. It's like the fragment is reacting, she thought, pressing a hand to her ribs. Almost as if it knows what we're trying to do. Harry noticed her discomfort and supported her gently. We'll push on, he said softly, but if it gets too painful, she shook her head. I can bear it, there's no turning back. They pressed deeper. Ancient carvings on the stone walls depicted a story lost to time, swirling figures in conflict, a mirror stand at the center. It was as if the fortress itself had once been a place of dark secrets. Now, it called out again. Rounding a final bend, they entered a wide chamber whose ceiling disappeared into blackness. At the far side was a raised platform, and on that platform stood what appeared to be a large, oblong mirror. Despite the layer of dust coating its edges, the reflective surface shone with an otherworldly sheen, as though lit from within. Hermione nearly fell to her knees. A deep pounding in her chest, the Horcrux, began to throb, protesting her approach to something that might sever its hold. Harry supported her. Together, they faced the object that might hold the key to her salvation. But then a low chuckle echoed through the chamber, bouncing off ancient stone columns. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and menacing. You think you can wield the mirror of severance against him? The figure sneered. He foresaw this. He will not allow his precious Horcrux to be torn from you so easily. Harry raised his wand, jaw clenched. Hermione, though panting from pain, lifted hers as well. She recognized the silhouette of a formidable agent, perhaps one of Voldemort's most dangerous followers. Her heart fluttered in fear, yet her eyes never left the mirror behind the intruder. As if sensing her determination, the mirror shimmered. Its surface flickered once, revealing a swirl of dark shapes within. Hermione felt a faint pull in her very core, the piece of Voldemort's soul reacting violently. Harry glanced at her. Ready? Her voice trembled but held steady conviction. Yes. In that moment, they understood that this confrontation, both with the enemy in front of them and the darkness inside Hermione, would decide whether the Horcrux would be ended, or she would forever remain bound to Voldemort's malevolent legacy. The tall figure stepped forward, his gaze narrowed on Harry and Hermione. Cloaked in black, his voice cut through the stale air like a blade. "You stand upon cursed ground," he said, each syllable dripping contempt. "And you dare to tamper with what has been sealed here." Harry's wand was raised, his arm tensed. "We're done being pawns in your dark master's plan," he answered. Behind them, the mirror of severance shimmered, almost beckoning Hermione closer. A painful ache coursed through her chest, intensifying every second she remained so near that powerful relic. The fragment within her, Voldemort's soul shard, clashed against her will, like a caged beast sensing the coming end. Hermione forced her breathing to steady. She turned her gaze to the dark agent and spoke with quiet determination. "He used me, but he no longer controls me. If this mirror truly separates a being from its darkness, I will break free from him." A bitter laugh escaped the agent's lips. "You think it's so simple? You meddle with a magic older and crueler than you can fathom." Harry advanced a step, tension coiled in every muscle. "We've come too far to turn back now." "Indeed." The agent lifted his own wand, a swirl of energy gathering at its tip. "Your bravery ends here." In a burst of movement, spells crackled across the chamber. Blades of blue and red light collided, sparking flashes that illuminated every corner. Harry pivoted, launching a sharp beam that the agent narrowly deflected. Hermione, fighting a stabbing pain inside her ribcage, managed to hurl a disarming spell that rattled the pillars. Yet their opponent proved dangerously skilled. He parried each assault with unnerving precision, forcing Harry and Hermione into a defensive dance across the cold stone floor. Stray curses blasted chunks from the walls, and bits of debris clattered around them. Amid the chaos, Hermione's hand twitched toward the mirror. "We must reach it." She braced against a wave of darkness emanating from her own chest. "It knows we want to sever this bond." Harry spun, faint sweat on his brow, eyes locked on their foe. "Hermione, go," he shouted, throwing a barrage of quick fire spells. His last casting caused a swirl of dust to envelop the agent, obscuring his vision momentarily. Seizing her chance, Hermione dashed for the raised platform. The pain roared, like claws scraping at her from the inside. She stumbled up the steps, breath ragged. Her reflection in the mirror's polished surface looked pale and haunted. Before she could gather her thoughts, a sudden impact sent her reeling. The agent had broken free of Harry's cloud of dust and lunged forward, striking Hermione across the shoulder with a cursed wave of force. She cried out, dropping to one knee, vision swimming. "Not another step," he spat, advancing on her. "The Dark Lord's daughter will remain a vessel for his power." Hermione's heart pounded. She tightened her grip on her wand. "I was never just his daughter," she managed through clenched teeth. She unleashed a fierce spell that smashed into him at close range, knocking him back in a shower of sparks. Harry rushed to Hermione's side, helping her stand. The agent lay sprawled, momentarily stunned. A line of blood trickled across his temple, his breaths ragged. "Go," Harry insisted. "Use the mirror now, before he recovers or calls for reinforcements." Hermione inhaled shakily, her gaze turning to the mirror of severance. Its surface rippled like moonlit water. Stepping forward, she raised a trembling hand and pressed her fingertips to that eerie reflection. The instant she touched it, a surge of magic coursed through her body, electric, overwhelming. She found herself in a surreal inner space, like walking within her own mind. All around, swirling fog glowed with a pale luminescence. Phantom whispers fluttered at the edge of her hearing, her doubts, her fears, her anger. Standing opposite her in that fog was a tall, shadowy silhouette. The shape was unmistakable, Voldemort. "I will not be cast aside," the shadow hissed, voice echoing strangely. "I created you for a purpose. You owe me your power." Hermione's fists clenched. "I owe you nothing." The silhouette lunged, swirling tendrils of darkness lunging like serpents around Hermione's ankles and wrists. They tightened, cold and biting, as if to drag her down. Her heartbeat thudded violently in her ears. "Stay calm," she told herself. "He can't own you if you don't let him." She summoned every memory of warmth and loyalty she had ever felt, her determination to protect Harry, the compassion the caretaker had shown her, the unwavering belief that she could forge her own path. That bright resolve glowed in the center of her chest, repelling the vile tendrils. In a sudden surge of will, Hermione snapped the tendrils. The silhouette faltered, raging. She poured her conviction into a single thought: leave me. Your darkness is not my destiny. A shudder rippled through the silhouette. With a howl of frustration, it fractured into 1,000 shards, each floating momentarily before dissolving into the swirling glow. Hermione gasped, stumbling back. Back in the stone chamber, Harry watched in awe as the mirror's surface wreathed. Hermione's body shivered uncontrollably, and a dense black mist leaked out of her chest, drawn into the glass. She let out a strangled cry, her eyes wide, as though an invisible hand was tearing at her soul. Stay strong, Harry urged, voice rough with emotion. You can do this. The black mist swirled inside the mirror, coalescing into a screaming visage. With a final, horrible wail, the reflection shattered from within, exploding in a burst of dark light. Hermione collapsed onto the platform, unconscious. Harry sprinted forward, ignoring the shards of mirror scattered across the dais. Gathering Hermione into his arms, he pressed trembling fingers to her neck, relieved to find a pulse. Her breathing was faint, but steady. Meanwhile, the agent, bloody and shaking, had crawled to his feet, eyes locked on the broken relic that once housed the mirror of severance. His expression contorted with fury. You've destroyed the Dark Lord's final safeguard, he snarled. Harry glared at him, wand raised, anger burning bright. Consider that your master's final defeat. The agent let out an incoherent cry, staggering away. He made a last attempt to fling a curse, but Harry disarmed him in a decisive flash of light. The wand spun free from the agent's grasp, clattering across the floor. Defeated, the man clutched his wounded side and fled limping into the labyrinth of corridors, leaving behind only echoes of his footfalls. For a long moment, Harry simply knelt beside Hermione, worry etched on his face. The black shards of the mirror's remains glistened around them like malevolent ice. At last, Hermione stirred, eyelids fluttering open. She drew a weak breath. Hermione, Harry breathed, relieved. Are you all right? She let out a shaky exhale, eyes focusing as though coming back from a great distance. I feel. Confusion passed across her features. Then her hand went to her chest, finding the dull ache gone. It's empty, she whispered. That foul presence is gone. Tears welled in her eyes, both from exhaustion and overwhelming relief. Harry offered her a gentle smile, helping her sit upright. Her skin was clammy, but color was returning to her cheeks. She glanced around at the shattered relic. Did it truly work? Harry nodded, voice thick. I believe it did. You forced that soul piece out. The mirror destroyed it. Hermione let out a trembling laugh of raw emotion, tears slipping free. It's over, she murmured. I'm free. At length, Harry eased Hermione onto her feet, keeping a supportive arm around her waist. The world felt softer somehow, as if the oppressive aura that had stalked them for weeks had evaporated. But their victory was not without its cost. The mirror itself was destroyed, and with it any chance of using it again. Still, for Hermione, freedom from Voldemort's control was priceless. They navigated carefully back through the torchlit catacombs, their shadows stretching along the walls. Once outside in the open air, the twilight sky glowed with embers of dusk. Hermione inhaled deeply, marveling at how each breath felt lighter, more her own. Harry guided her to a short boulder, helping her rest. They both gazed into the distance, where the eastern hills gave way to a star-speckled horizon. Are you certain you're all right? He asked again, brushing hair from her face. She nodded, though weariness tugged at her limbs. I'll recover. She paused, eyes glistening. I've been living under that shadow my entire life without even knowing it. Now that it's gone, I'm finally whole. In the silence that followed, soft night winds rustled through grass and stones. Harry squeezed her hand reassuringly. We'll deal with whatever remains of Voldemort's forces. But they've lost the advantage of that Horcrux. Hermione looked at him with resolve, though her voice remained quiet. Whatever my father planned, it ends here. I won't be his unwilling creation anymore. She took a shaky breath, letting her shoulders relax. From now on, I stand on my own. It's time the world knew I'm no one's weapon. Harry nodded, admiration shining in his eyes. Then let's rebuild, together. She smiled, a tender, genuine expression that felt long overdue. I like the sound of that. In the weeks and months that followed, word spread among scattered communities of sorcerers that Voldemort's last known Horcrux had been destroyed, by none other than the one who had carried it. His network of fear began to crumble, fractured by the loss of the Dark Master's greatest secret. Hermione spent time regaining her strength and piecing together what her life now meant. Whenever she felt echoes of doubt or recalled Voldemort's cruel revelation, "You carry my blood," she remembered that she had severed that bond with an act of her own will. With every friend's smile, every encouraging word, the daughter he had molded for darkness found new purpose in forging her own identity. And if occasional nightmares revisited her, dreams of black flames and red eyes, she would wake to the knowledge that true belonging wasn't about lineage, but about one's choices, and the love one shared with others. Under the same night sky that witnessed her darkest hour, Hermione discovered a new dawn, a world where she stood not as a vessel of evil, but as a young woman shaped by compassion, determination, and freedom. No father's curse could ever take that away.